So last but most definitely not least is Larry Pierce, who is very much the reason why we had this whole event today, because his donation of his cameras led to this wonderful exhibition on the third floor of the CMP, which led to me being able to finally justify doing a big program like this about cameras at the California Museum of Photography with its huge camera collection. So I'm so pleased to introduce Larry and have him give his paper called "To Turn a Camera: A Survey of Camera Designs 1880 to 1915 That Enable a Horizontal or Vertical Photograph Format." Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. I'm a geochemist. Oh, yeah, okay. I'm a geochemist and scientist by nature, and I've thought on numerous occasions that I wallow in minutiae about things, and that's the same with these antique cameras. I tend to wallow in minutiae. So I really appreciate being able to talk to you today and have you wallow right there along with me. Let's go on to that. I can't read from over there, so I'm gonna have to look. I have to look at it. Can you hear me still? All right. I underlined field view camera because that's primarily what I'm going to talk about here. The designs of studio cameras are really pretty stable, even over the period of time when the designs of field view cameras were wildly changing. One of the things that is fascinating to me is how many different designs they managed to come up with over a period of only about 5 or 6 years that allowed cameras to move from vertical to horizontal format for the edification of their photographers. So I'm going to do a survey of a number of these different methods using cameras that are primarily here at the museum, but some of them are ones I've watched since I donated to the museum. So here's the one that is a 5x5-inch ground glass. So it's a 4x5 camera. And as such, it was never considered a studio camera, even though the base is not folding and it's clunky. It was meant to be used out in the field. And in fact, the owner built that nifty little carrying case for it. It was never meant to be turned on its side either, though. So how does it change from vertical to horizontal format, even in 4x5? That's done inside of the plate holder there. I didn't know that I was going to need a photograph of the inside of the plate holder, so I don't have one, but that's the way this is established. You can see there's these little, some kind of patented folders. I never did look into this. These little patented folders that are holding probably dry plates, and they go in either into the square plate holder, either horizontally or vertically. This shows you a better idea of it. Is there's an opening of that kind of plate holder where there's some wood kits or something inside the plate holder to allow a vertical or horizontal format. That particular camera is over here. That probably doesn't have the hardware to make the bed rigid. Oh, it does. Okay. Yeah. So this is a J.A. Anderson. It's a Chicago maker, not a big maker, but they seem to specialize in gigantic cameras. In fact, they were the ones that made the Mammoth camera, which I think the plate size was 4 feet by 8. And it resided on a railroad car. That's how it moved around. Well, anyway, J.A. Anderson. This is called the new. Oh, I'm putting it on top of stuff. This is called the New View. It has a square ground glass, just like I mentioned on the first camera that we looked at. That's how you can tell that the vertical to horizontal switch is done somewhere inside or using the plate holder, not the camera itself. This was meant to just sit here just like that. Okay, we saw that one. This is another J.A. Anderson, and I like big cameras, I cannot lie. This one is a 14 by 17 camera, and it is not a new view, but it's what I've considered to be either the Anderson's view box or compact view box. 2 cameras which are named in ads, but never given any details as to what they are or a picture of what they are. But this has the same kind of plate holder where you adjust things around in there until you get vertical or horizontal. This one would no doubt also have a way to reduce the size of the plate that you're going to use in that camera by having, well, something like that over there. This is a very interesting camera in that it's a monorail camera from 1883. It was designed by William Walker and made by the Rochester Optical Company, which is essentially a startup company in this era. That has, as it says on the top, the trick on that one is the plate holder only does 4 by 5, but it can be installed in one of 2 directions on the back of the camera. So you either install it vertically or horizontally, and it's got the hardware and the little slots. One of the ways the plate holder stays on is that there are little slots that fit little projections in the back. Again, I didn't take the right picture to show that, but it is what it is. Now, American Challenge View camera, remember that they made that in 1883. This is another one, the Flandro. This is upstairs on exhibition. Another, I don't have a plate holder for this, but you can tell from the square ground glass and the various little things like 2 little posts at the bottom. That's what holds the plate holder in there when you remove the ground glass. Here's 2 little posts down here, and then clips that hold the plate holder at the top. And the plate holder would have holes to match those posts on 2 of its sides and brads to go with those clips over there. Just very similar to the last one. This is a different kind of idea. It's a patent by Rasmus Barker, who is connected with the E&HT Anthony Company. The idea here is you have screw holes, 2 screw holes in the rear standard, 1 screw hole in the front standard, and you can unscrew the top of the camera from the base and turn it physically and screw it back in with the 3 screws. Now, somebody had the idea that that was a good idea, that you are out in the field and you've got 3 screws in one hand, the top of the camera in the other hand, and the bottom of the camera in your third hand. And there's a general rule of thumb that I have found to be true, that if a piece can be removed from a camera or is removed during normal action, it will be lost. These ground glass backs that we've been removing over here are about 50% of the time not there. Oh, I forgot to say, this is March 28th, 1882. This is the announcement of Ian H.D. Anthony's novel camera, April 1882. Within a month, it had now changed to a tapered bellows, a frame front, and these nice little shifting front and a rising front here. But the screw holes are still there. They're there, and I think there are now 2 in the front. So if they ever produce this, I don't know if they ever did, because I've never seen one. I'd like to see it, but I haven't seen it. But who in the heck would be crazy enough to make such a camera that falls apart and you have to hold screws? The answer is Rochester Optical Company. Not only that, but they named it exactly the same thing as the other camera that was a monorail camera. This was advertised in the Gentleman's Magazine of 1883 as the American Challenge wooden, or I added the wooden base camera so I could tell the difference between the two. This was advertised as the American Challenge camera. A year later, they had a catalog and they called it the Challenge camera. So now, at least it's the Challenge camera instead of 2 American Challenge cameras. It also has a very interesting tripod mount on the bottom, which is a ball and socket joint. So you put that in there, then it just is infinitely adjustable. So that was pretty good. But you still have here are 2 large screws, 2 small screws. And if you're going to do it vertically, and I'm not going to attempt it, the large screws go in the front standard, small screws go in the back standard. It actually works. And this one has all the parts. I bought a second one of those. It was in its original case as well. This one is in the original case. So you have a camera in its original case. The entire base is gone. It's one of the parts that you have to hold in your third hand. Apparently the person only had 2 hands. This is one of the easier ones, and you can see 1872, that may not be when it was made. That's just happens to be when the catalog was printed that I pulled this description from. Second tripod mount. So you have a tripod mount there and one under here. So all you do is take it off your tripod, flip it over, and it goes. This is used on a lot of cameras. Usually, well, this one is not one of the cheaper ones. The Scoville 76 camera, as it implies, was introduced in 1876, but it's they were vying for the world's largest tripod mount there. This is one of Scoville's cheaper models. This one is kind of interesting because it's never been used. But again, second tripod mount. And E&HC Anthony, Manhattan View over there. Manhattan View is one of these weird cameras. You don't know why it actually exists. This bed here does not fold. They made lots of cameras where the bed folded at the same time. It's not exactly an early camera, 1889 to 1892, but it does not fold. Consequently, its carrying case is almost as big as my arms can carry. It has a handle on top, but still, it's a whopper of a case. Sometimes there are cameras made that were so skeletal in nature that they didn't dare put a second tripod mount on. At least that's my theory about it. This is a Scoville camera they called the tourist pocket camera. It has, you may remember this arrangement here with the rods from the Flandro camera. In the Flandro, the camera has a base. All the rods are used for is pushing the focus back and forth. However, this one has no base except for the rods themselves. The rods screw into the front standard, which is only a 1/4 inch wide. This is a 5x8 camera, by the way. And so Scoville patented this device here, which consists of 2 plates with a hinge and then a rod that goes through here. If you want to bring the camera down to horizontal, the rod will go through here, and then there's some kind of thumb screw to fasten it all together, but I don't see it in this drawing here. That's an interesting little camera. Of course, to fold up, you have to unscrew these rods. And what happens when you unscrew the rods? They go away. The camera that's upstairs, it's not on exhibit, but in the collection, the camera, I made some rods for it so that you could see how the camera sits. It doesn't have the nifty stuff there, whatever that does, I don't know. But at least it shows how the camera would look. Okay, back to the Anthony novel view that was introduced in April 1882. They said they were going to make a novel view. Anthony made a lot of novel cameras and novelette cameras. Novel cameras were hefty man's cameras, and then the novelette cameras were much lighter in weight, let's say. So this is the one that I don't know that's ever been made. Next one. If you get enough of these things, I finally got enough of these that I could start seeing some kind of chronology here that looked like there was an evolution of the novel camera. All novel and novelette cameras, except for this one, have bellows that rotate around the front standard. And I have one over here I can show you, but this one is the sole exception. And I think it came right after, or maybe it's the first novel ever produced. It has a single piece of metal here and these keyhole slots. Those fit. There is also a strip of metal under here and keyhole slots, spaced exactly the same. And the bottom of the standard has some oversized screw heads that fit into the large part of the keyhole slot. You put both of those, put this over both of those, and then slide the rear standard to the side to lock it in. And it actually works pretty good. The front, assuming you got this off, you have to loosen this thumb screw here, then it pull the whole top of it off to look like that. Then you can turn it, put it back on the other way. You see there's a hole here. These two holes will go there. And then this will be the new thumb screw for locking the front standard. I never would have guessed this existence of this camera until I bought one of these things. Although looking back at the literature, in their early catalogs, you can see one of their engravings. They like to use the engravings till they fall apart. So one of their engravings, you could see that it had the thumb screws at right angles, which means that it wasn't a revolving camera, even though all of the description in the catalog said this bellows revolves. But they kept the engraving because it was a damn good engraving. Oh, was I going to demonstrate that? So I don't know if we can do this on here.
Should I clear the cart for you and you can use the cart as a table?
Well, so to demonstrate that's pretty good. See, look at that, it holds itself. Oh, we never got this. I don't know. Well, I'm just going to push this to the side to show you how the back comes off. Like that. And then this. Yeah, I need a third hand to move that. Anyway, it's starting to move up. You can get the idea. If you can see these screws on there, those are the two screws. And I'll just put it back. The trick is figuring out where the screws are. There. This one I just got. It is another one I never knew existed. It still has this single strip and two screw keyhole slots, but this time the front revolves around there's a round thing here and it continuously revolves around if you want it to. And here's the screw heads that attach to the keyhole slots when you get it where you want it. Notice that this one has the thumb screws on both sides. It doesn't need one down here because it's always going to be the same way. This one, this single strip, I've only ever seen in the two cameras that you just got shown. Because they figured out if you ever had any rough handling of the camera, the back would get wobbly with just two keyhole slots. So they replaced them with two very hefty brass plates, each having two keyhole slots, and held into the camera with 8 screws, each one. And then the bottom has 4 screw heads to fit. This is the vertical one. There's the one for the horizontal. They made these corners out of just sheet brass. And it would be nice if when you pull the bellows back, the front of the camera didn't start going back with it. But that can happen with these. They really needed some heftier hardware in the front. Like that. This is 11 by 14, and 8 by 10 still had the sheet brass, but 11 by 14 has cast brass, huge cast brass things. And I think it's got 10 screws, not 8 at this point. This one has a kind of molding holding in the ground glass that I've never seen before. Usually the molding is very rounded, and it has these nifty little slivers of wood that get shoved in between the wood and the ground glass and hold it in quite well. But as time goes on, if you can count on anything, you can count on cameras being made less expensively and less ornately. This is the next generation where there's no molding here. There's no little pieces of wood. It's a flat piece of wood and 4 corner brass pieces. But otherwise, it's the same camera. These, all the novels have a ground glass frame that's an inch across here. They also, if they have a stereo ready one, like this one is, it's not a stereo camera because it's only got one lens, but it's got a lens board wide enough to have a stereo pair in there. And this front is huge enough to allow the very large dimension of the bellows to revolve around it. Here's their ultimate folly, in my opinion, is a camera called the Clover, or the combination novel camera. The idea was to have a camera that could do everything a studio camera could do, and then with just a few deft movements of the hands, be converted into a field camera. This is the field camera version. Whether it started out a Clover or not, I don't know. It may just be a 14 by 17 inch Laval camera. But in order to make this work, you'd have to be able to detach these bellows right here, take out this piece entirely, in addition to this bellows, the next piece, and the next bellows, and finally put this bellows onto this, the rear standard, like it is over here. Did anyone ever do that? I don't know. Here's a novelette. You may notice this is pretty skinny stuff, 1/2 inch instead of inch thick wood. This one is 4 by 5, so you might expect it to be a little bit thinner than other cameras, but no, it isn't. It's the same. They're 1/2 inch regardless of how big the novelette camera is. This one has a nice method of making the bed rigid, which consists of a big brass plate that normally sits entirely on the part that doesn't hinge up. But when you want it to make the bed rigid, you shove that back, and there's no way that bed is ever going to be anything but horizontal. And that's saying something. Most of these cameras have a little bit of give to the method of making the bed rigid. And the fancier they get with it, the worse it works. The ones that just have a thumb screw where you screw it in as tight as you want, that works fine. So does this. But when they start, Anthony has little levers that come down sometimes, and those things are terrible. Speaking of which, here's the levers. Here's a lever right here. It goes down here. They actually did a nice thing and put a brass plate for the lever to bear against, but still it loosens up over time. Now you notice that they've given up on those sheet brass kind of things. They've got a brass arrangement soldered together here, and then they have some pieces to shore it up. It still doesn't work. You cannot stop that front from bending back. This is, the last one was a stereo. In the novelette, they're trying to reduce the weight all the time. So for this stereo ready one, they cut the edges off of the big square thing that was there in the novel cameras is now a circle. So you lose a little bit of weight. This is the non-stereo version. And they're still trying the various things over here to stop that problem. For some reason, they made some of these with solid bases. Who can understand? In order to make it work, they have a thing to make a thumb screw to make the base rigid that is a full 5 or 6 inches long that goes into the back part of the base. You'll notice they have now added some pretty big sheet brass over here, not 2 little pieces of sheet brass, but at 1 sheet brass. And they've also put in some bracing to keep that back from keep the front from going back. Another one of their experiments, they decided that they could, by having a brass lever, they could allow the part of the novelette camera that spins to be removed entirely. So here's the round piece, and here's the round piece that normally sits in there and spins around inside of that cavity there. But they said, let's have 5x8 camera and an 8x10 camera. People can buy them both. Judging from how many of them you see, they didn't buy very many of them. They also had a front view, or front focus rather. This one has a rack and pinion focus, whereas all of the previous ones we've been looking at had a push focus. I don't think they made very many of these either. Nobody really wants a front focus camera. This is the Phantom, which I bought from Michael in 1989. At a Christie's auction of a guy who had a all Anthony collection. This is I think I saw another Phantom in my life. Again, whoops. Hitting the wrong button. Again, they've got all sorts of band-aids to try and fix this problem of the front being pulled back by the bellows. This is the most compact of any of the Anthony novel or novelette cameras. This comes off. The brass part comes off and it goes, you just push it back in there somewhere. And then the bottom folds up. Or does it fold back? I can never figure it out. You can see this maze of thumb screws and slots over here. I really have no idea how this thing goes together or comes out or comes back together. What I usually do is I remove or I loosen up every thumb screw on the camera, and then I kind of just take this bag of bones and shape it like a camera ought to be shaped. I don't do it often enough to remember how to do that. the Fairy novel, yet another one of their cameras, is nothing more than a novel camera with a rack and pinion focus that goes down the middle. For some reason, they did a lot of work on this thumb screw here. See how smooth this is? I think people kind of complained about that, and they said, we can't get the focus to move with a thumb screw that's that smooth. So they made this one. It's twice as wide and it's got a deeper knurling. I think they still complained. And you got this, which is a ship's wheel. And that you can move it anywhere you want. This one happens to be Circassian walnut, one of their options. It's a very striking, vivid kind of wood grain there. Okay, that's Anthony was one of the big monsters of the camera world in the 1880s. The other one was American Optical, or Scoville, who owned American Optical. This is a patent by Matthias Fleming, and it is nothing. It's about the same time that the novels were coming out, but this is a brass ring inlet into a really nice piece of wood, and it's got a zillion screws around the edge. It also has holes from time to time, which register with this little doodad here that you can pull out a spring-loaded brass rod. So it will slide in between the registrations, and then when it hits vertical or hits horizontal, the brass rod will slip into one of those holes. Now this is not accurate. The screw slots there are not accurate for an American Optical camera because they are the class of cameras. They're works of art. If you had an American Optical camera like this here, you would notice that every one of the screw slots is parallel to the ring. How do you get them parallel to the ring? Trial and error. You have a giant box of screws and you try them until you get one that is parallel to the ring. Then you go on to the next one of 12 or whatever, however many there are there. This, again, is a big camera, 11 by 14. The trouble with the Fleming revolving back camera is that for the size of an 11 by 14 ground glass, you've got a camera that's as big as a 14 by 17 camera that doesn't have a revolving back. There's the doodad you have to pull out, and it's in between its registrations, but see, I can't. Anyway, heavy, big, heavy camera, but beautiful. This is more like it, a 5 by 7 version. This is another one of Matthias Fleming's inventions, is a rod and pocket system to keep the bed rigid. Did it keep the bed rigid? No, it did not. They're always loose. So the bed can go up about 5 degrees sometimes. They realized that the cameras were getting big. This was the choice. Let's have the ring go outside the rest of the camera. You might be able to see on this one where the screw heads are. The screw heads along here would also be lined up. if they're in the original spots, and all the screw heads here and across here and down over there. Every screw head in an American Optical camera came out of the factory with all the screw slots aligned. This is one with a rack and pinion focus. They never mention that in the catalogs anywhere. And I got a lot of catalogs for Scoville and American Optical. They put out a bunch every 4 or 6 months during the years about 1886 to 1892 or something. Nice rack and pinion though. And the front focus, just like we saw with the Anthony novels, the novelette front focus. Front focus ones were always rack and pinion, and they always have the Fleming rod and pocket. Although with a camera this size is 5x8, it can hold that. But when you get to an 11x14 camera, you're not going to hold that together with a rod and pocket. Actually, I don't think that one did have a rod and pocket. The Whopper. That had a thumb screw and a plate on the other side. That's how to hold a base together. Never saw any mention of a stereo version of a revolving back camera. Yet there it is. Nice Morrison lenses too. These are lenses that Scoville sold, and I think they got the same serial number, which is one way you can tell if you're being sold a bill of goods as far as a stereo camera goes. If somebody just threw two like looking lenses together, they won't have the same serial number, that's for sure, or successive serial numbers sometimes. This camera, never have seen this in a catalog. It has the revolving back over here, but it has the front made out of nickel plated brass rods, like one of Scoville's other cameras called the Star camera. Now, there is a camera called the Elm City camera, which is mentioned only twice that I can find, and they're both in Scoville annuals that they put out every year. In 1898, I think it was, or 1896, I put up there. Anyway, the price, the mentions of the Elm City in 1896 and 7 or whatever it was, are kind of a closeout deal or a discounted kind of thing. Regardless of whether it was discounted or not, the price they wanted for the Elm City camera was as much or more than the Fleming revolving back camera. That's why I think this could be the Elm City camera, the mythical Elm City camera that I've never seen a description of, but it's some expensive camera, that's for sure. Oh, this is just going back. I have a category, bellows and back disengaged to be rotated. And this one does. We've seen that one before, but we haven't seen this one. This is made by the Fleming Camera Company. After he worked for Scoville for umpty-ump years, Matthias Fleming started his own company in 1896, I think, and was only in business for a few years, and then he died shortly after that anyway. But I think I've only ever seen 2 cameras that claim ever to be made by the Fleming Camera Company. This one, fortunately enough, has a label, so it's obvious it's made by the Fleming Camera Company. The other one was a leather-covered red bellows thing, little 4x5 thing. Somebody wrote an article about it because they proved that was made by the Fleming Camera Company. This, I do like big cameras, 20 by 36 inches ground glass. Of course, it doesn't have a ground glass because it doesn't have a back. I did this last summer, I think, or it was the last winter, made a back for it. Now I have to find ground glass for it. I think I'm going to have to make it. The amazing thing about this is here's Matthias Fleming, inventor of the Fleming revolving back camera. What the heck is this? He used the Anthony version of moving the camera around, but he did invent this thing here, which is there's no moving parts here. You just shove this part up into a void far enough that this gets over the rim of the wood in there, and then you drop it down and there it is. Light, tight, no moving parts. One of the most successful versions is the back of the camera unclips and reclips. What could be simpler? You have little spring-loaded clips here and here. They hold on to a screw head. And if you want to remove the back, you just push these out to the side and off it comes. And if you want to change the format, you just switch it over and it'll clip right back on. This was around starting 1884. So what was all that other stuff about? In fact, this was used by many manufacturers. Here's a Blair. Instead of having clips at the side, he's got a clip in the middle. This is Rochester Optical. They happen to have these cool little cam shaped or cam action things where you have a brad sitting on the back and you slide it into a slot and then you turn this cam thing, and the more you turn it, the tighter it gets. It's a perfect system, expensive to make. So they didn't have that very long. Another Blair that does have clips on the side. I've often thought Blair, I don't know if I've ever seen two Blair cameras the same. This one happens to have a solid base for some reason. And I thought for a longest time, oh, they only did that because it was a 4x5 and it's easier to make a solid base in 4x5 than a frame base in 4x5. Right up to the point that I found a 6.5 by 8.5 one with a solid base. This is a G. Generic company, Brighton View, another company that was capable of making some very nice cameras. You could see the really nice metalwork on this, and the finish is good. This one is kind of unusual in that they hadn't figured out how to get two halves. They wanted to have the back focus and the front focus at the same time, but they didn't figure out how to get two of them on the same track without the camera being too big. So they made the front rack and pinion focus with a slot following the slot here. The back is a push-pull focus sliding on this center. Weird. This is Seneca. I'm just throwing in all the cameras that have used this back with the clips, because after about 1900, all of them did. I just threw this in here because of this cool revolving front, though. Conley, 1910, same thing. Kodak, Eastman View number 1, number 2, number 2D, the ubiquitous number 2D. They always use these. And that's all. Thank you so much. See the cameras, see some cameras on 3. Here's a website where every camera that I've ever owned has its pictures on there, and every catalog I've ever owned, almost, has been scanned and is on that website. So that's many thousands of pages I can attest to.